All right, as it's 5 o'clock. Is somebody not?
The Finance Committee meeting to order. Michelle, roll call.
Yes. Brian Nichols,
Here.
Brian Anderson.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. Do we have an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? That passes. Move on to item 2A, financial reports. Bob, if you want to enlighten us on May financials?
Point of order, would you like to do the minutes?
Thank you for that point of order. We're going to reverse to item 1D,
Okay.
an approval of our previous meeting minutes that were distributed in the packet. Any changes, corrections, or comments to the minutes? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
And I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? And that passes. Thank you, Michelle, for that. Item 2A, we'll try it again. Bob?
Bed. Thank you. We'll start again. Thank you for that. So we've got the May financials displayed on the screen and for the public as well. That was also included in board packet. We'll begin by looking at May's revenues with regards to the operating funds without any grants, the no grants. We'll kind of walk through some of the line items and talk about them as we go. Starting at the top, we'll just talk the second row down, revenue from local sources. If you scroll to the far right, you see that our revenues for the current fiscal year are up over $288,000. Large component of that is due to increased investment earnings throughout the year. As interest rates were going higher, we have sufficient funds invested, so we were able to generate some additional dollars there, so that's been helpful. Coming down to the middle of the page, the next real significant item is revenue from state sources. You can see there, and I'll just kind of point this out. If you look in the fiscal year to date activity column for 22-23, you see about 53.3 million. We go over to the 21-22, 52.6, almost 52.7 million. So we've got $665,000 plus dollars ahead of where we were last year at this point in time. A large driver of that is because of the state equalization aid payments. During prior school years, the state used to pay equalization aid payments in 5 payments over a fiscal year. And here at the beginning of this year, the DPI adjusted that and changed it so that there were 4 payments a year. So we're just getting a little bit of our money earlier throughout the year, and that is really what has driven why that's looking so favorable to us. Of course, when things are looking good, there's also things that sometimes don't look so good on here. And the next line down talks about revenue from federal sources. Again, you know, we've got $1.1+ million received in the current fiscal year. This point in time last year through the end of May, just over 2.3 million. So we're trailing by about $1.1 million. You may recall we talked a little bit about this last month, that last school year in the 21-22 school year, the School District of Beloit received a one-time grant from the governor's office, GEAR grant, kind of one of those one-off stimulus grants. So that's really what drove that additional funding in 21-22. Yes.
Yeah, and I remember we had that conversation, and I don't remember if I asked this question then, so if I did, I apologize. But that makes sense for why we had the reduction in revenue. I guess if we knew it's a one-time, why was it budgeted to be received again? Because my thought would be, hey, that's fine, it's down 1.2 million over last year, but still on budget.
good question, and I'm not sure if it was necessarily included in the $2.1 million revised budget for 22-23, or if there's other federal grants that were expected in there also. Great question. I wasn't here at that point in time. So I can't speak a lot to what went into the input for the 22-23 budget building process itself.
Just something I'm trying to be conscious of as we go into the next budget season. Like I would
Right.
just, like if we're not going to get some money, then let's not budget it, because otherwise we beat ourselves up saying, how come we're not making budget? And it's like, well, we were never going to get that bucket
begin
of money
with.
anyway, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, we certainly need to get more specific into the details of some of the revenue and expense instead of budgeting based on prior year activities, so to speak. You're exactly right. The other thing that I'd point out that kind of resonated with me as I was preparing for tonight's presentation is a lot of my talking points tonight, quite honestly, because we're looking at fiscal year-to-date comparisons, 1 month to the same point in time last year. When we had an activity that occurred in a prior month, we kind of keep repeating the same talking point as to why that variance exists. So that might be something we look at changing for future presentations, but for now, we'll kind of continue on. Again, the last line item, other revenues, you can see there, shy about $478,000+, largely due to the timing of some receipts. So nothing really too significant. The one thing I would point out, if you look at the total revenue row, in the current, I guess now previous school year, the 22-23 school year, at the end of May, we had $56.8+ million in revenues compared to the same point in time in the 21-22 school year of $57.4+ million. So we're actually trailing the prior year by just under $600,000. If you take out that one-time governor's grant to the school district, we're actually ahead. So any questions on the revenues before we move on to the expenses?
the only question I have is then, so let's just say, obviously, when we need some things to wash out here through June, and you'll back some entries in even after June.
Correct.
Right? So,
Yep.
knowing that, yeah, we're down, this 56.8, is down. We would be ahead if we had that other money that may or may not have been budgeted for. Do we think, because we're budgeted to be $1.4 million, $1.3 million, let's say, over last year, at least through this 11-month period, right?
Yep. So
do you expect the same proportion to come in June and subsequent months to finish the year end? As it went from 57.4 million to 92.8. Well, 54. That's not true. That's the budget. It's not
Right.
the move to that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess
I get your points, and I'll try to address those for you. So the first thing I would do is point out that in the 22-23 school year through the end of May, we've got $56.8 million in revenue as compared to the budget for the 22-23 school year of $94 million. So obviously a significant difference, right? I mean, that's $35, almost $40 million difference. There's a lot of revenue that comes into the school district in the last month of the year. Kind of foolish because, we prefer that money earlier in the year to pay for everything throughout the year. But we receive a significant amount of equalization aid and other open enrollment revenues. Of course, we also have open enrollment expenses that occur in June. So June is a very busy month from a financial activity perspective. And while we are here on, July 11th today, to be honest with you, we probably really won't close out June for another 4 weeks or so at the end of our audit process. So lots of activity in bookkeeping still to occur in the month of June. Okay. Well, in the month of July for the month of June. Yeah. So we'll scroll down and take a look at expenses. Again, looking at the month of May. On a fiscal year basis, we'll start at the top and again work our way down. I'll just talk about those that have significant variances in the far right corner. And we'll start with salaries and fringe benefits. Just pointing this out, in the 22-23 fiscal year at the end of May, $50.2 million in salary and fringe benefit expenses as compared to 50.5 plus in the 21-22. So about $356, almost $357,000 less in paying our staff. So of course, you know, you're going to ask the question, well, why is that? And a lot of that, to be honest with you, is going to be driven by the fact that we had some staff positions that were budgeted for, not filled. Dr. Garrison kind of put some freezes in place and kind of avoided. So that's helped to fund that savings. Looking at purchase services, again, if we go to the far right, you'll see a significant $4+ million reduction in expenses in purchase services. And a lot of that, again, if you recall from prior months, we talked about how we have transitioned our HES custodial monthly expenses out of our general operation budget or our no grant budget and into our grant, our ESSER 3 budget. And the reason for doing that, it's an allowable expense within ESSER 3, but the reason for doing that then is that it frees up those resources in our general operation funds so that we can further minimize any deficit that were to occur, or perhaps even provide resources that we can use then in following this current now 23-24 fiscal year.
Bob, so then, you know, we haven't done the budget for next year, but obviously you can't, that would likely get added in back into this fund next year.
Yes, it will come back into the Fund 10 no grants expense, right?
Okay, so we didn't have less of an expense, it's just not out of this bucket.
Correct. We pulled it out of the grant bucket because it was an allowable expense instead of out of our general operation bucket, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we could have retained it in the general operation budget, but that would have meant that we would have had significant resources in the grant funds then to apply elsewhere, increasing expenditures instead of trying to save expenses and plan more strategically for the district going forward. Yep, great question. Thanks for that clarification. Capital objects, again, another savings, $422,000 in change. And looking at my notes here, again, we talked about this in prior months. There was some maintenance equipment that was purchased in prior months that helped to contribute to that. If we drop down a line, the debt retirement, you can actually see that there we have increasing in expenses, $434,000 in change compared to just under $176,000 as of the same reporting period last year. And those debt retirements increases were due to the timing of payments. Apparently, the district renewed a lease with Apple for some MacBooks back in August of 22. So it would have been early in the fiscal year. And again, one of those talking points that's probably been talked about on and off since that point in time. The last comment here is transfers, $961,000, almost $962,000 in transfer expenses in the 22-23 school year. Nothing booked at the end of May in 21-22. A large portion of that was, well, actually all of that at this point in time was related to a transfer to our Fund 38 non-referendum debt service fund to make principal and interest payments earlier in the fiscal year. So again, if you look at the total expense line, $61.8 million in expenses at the end of May in 22-23 compared to $65.7 million at the end of May in the 21-22 school year. So about a $4 million reduction in expenditures. Obviously, that's a good thing for us. So, yeah. Any questions on the expenses? No grants before we move on to the grant-related activity? I'll scroll myself down. All right. So looking at the revenues for our grants, and this takes into consideration all of the various grants that the school district receives. We'll start in the middle, the revenue from state sources. just over $2 million in the 22-23 received as of the end of May, compared to just under $2 million in 21-22. So about $115,000 on the plus side of the equation for us. The next line down is very significant. We'll look at the revenue from federal sources. $4.6 million received in May as of 22-23, compared to $6.5 million in 21-22, so a variance of over $1.9 million. Great questions as to why, and a lot of that is honestly just in regards to the timing of getting claims processed on our end, submitted to the DPI, processed on their end, and then those payments finally making their way back to the school district. So, not anything really to be concerned about. The great thing about grants is that, once we spend the money, then we have the opportunity to get that money back through the systems. That it just takes some time. Sometimes we can turn that around in as little as 2 weeks, and quite honestly, sometimes it may take as much as 3 months if the issue's on our end or if we're waiting for DPI to do their processing before we get the money back. So a lot of it is just timing. If you look in the explanations, in the middle there, there's a comment about revenue from federal sources, and it lists the number of the grants and the amounts that came in May of 23. I just want to point out that that value is almost $1,570,000 worth of revenue that came in as a result of grant expenditures. So that's just kind of a snapshot as to how that works for you. Any questions there? You make life easy. We'll look at the expense side of the equation then for grants. Again, starting at the top, we'll work our way down salary and fringe benefits. You can see that our expenses on salary and fringes are running about $565,000 ahead of where they were last year. A lot of that would be because there are perhaps some grants that have additional staffing that are being charged to that grant this year. Of course, there was increases in compensation for staff from last year to this year as well. Fringe benefit increases, health insurance is an example. So that would explain that. Purchase services, again, looking to the far right, about $4.1 million ahead. And if that number sounds vaguely familiar to you, if we go back to the expenditure reductions with no grants, that value was a reduction of $4 million, almost $64,000. So very tightly aligned to this $4.1 million. Non-capital objects, reduction there of about $835,000. And a comment here also noted in the explanations that there was a purchase of reading curriculum, non-capital object expenses in the 21-22 school year, which would have increased that, and that's why that variance exists there. So again, looking at total expenses, $13.6 million through the end of the 22-23 for May for our grant expenses, as compared to $9.2 million in 21-22, variance of about $4.4 million. I would point out, if you recall, and let me just kind of back this up real quick. I want to go back to the revenues for the grants. If you look at fiscal year to date activities, $6.7 million, and we come back down to expenses, you'll see that it's $13.6 million. So that's a difference of about $7 million. So we've got about $7 million worth of activity that has occurred, that we've incurred that expense. We've not yet completed the grant claim. We need to submit that to the DPI for those various grants to get those resources back to the district.
Okay, yeah, thank you for saying that, because that question was coming up. But do we take on projects or expenses that are grant funded that are in excess of our grant amount? I mean, or is the idea that the grants pay for the program?
So let me jump in on that one real quick. So 2 ways with how the grants, and then a lot of times how districts kind of work them. Naturally, there's a there's an award amount that you can apply for. You don't always get that full amount. Okay, so let's just say there's a $5 million grant for, let's just say, technology. We apply for it, they give us $2 million. So technically, we got $2 million to work with. We then try to spend all that money, right? Up to, let's just say, $1.5 million, or let's say we get to $1.5 million worth. From there, there's a possibility of them allowing us to roll over those funds into the next year as well. So now we get to roll over an additional $500,000 to spend for the next year, okay? Now, if it's a reoccurring grant, let's say you're $1.5 million, over the next 2 years, you got $3 million. So now I have $500,000 that I get to roll over, plus another $1.5 million that's coming in. And so this really depends on the grant language in order for us to determine like how we're gonna actually spend all the money. But sometimes there's rollover opportunities if we don't spend up all of the money.
Okay, on the flip side then, are there grants, let's, in that same scenario, we get a $2 million technology grant, and then we say, you know what? We only got $2 million, we applied for $5 million, but we want to spend the $5 million because that's what we decided we need.
Sure.
And so there's a shortfall between what's grant
Funded.
revenue funded and what would show up maybe on the grant expense analysis because,
If
Well, that's
those
where-
monies are available to be reallocated from within the technology budget in this instance, then that would be a permissible thing. Otherwise, yeah, that we would shun upon, overspending those.
so typically we don't do that.
No, correct.
Okay.
Something to keep in mind is that, and this is rather infrequent, but it does occur with the DPI with some grants, is that they'll make a grant award, but they'll require you to have kind of a local investment. So like we may grant you $100,000, but you need to contribute an additional 20% towards that project. So we may have to out $20,000 to do a $120,000 project, and then the DPI covers, the 100,000 portion of it.
Okay.
So that does occur. It's not frequent,
But
but
generally, the grant
Covers.
revenue expenses should marry each other once we round out the year.
Yes, and in
close.
fact, in the budgeting process that we have to do with the DPI, it really has to tie out very tightly.
Okay.
They're sticklers about that, to be honest, and rightfully so.
Yep.
Yep. Just the last page, the board report summary, just to kind of point this out, and I think May is a great example here. If you look at our total revenues for the month, just under 2.6 million, but yet our expenses over 7.6 million, a $5 million variance plus there. It goes to emphasize the importance of the school district having a sufficient amount of fund balance available to help cover those expenses in those periods of time, like the month of May, where we receive very little revenue, but yet our expenses stay relatively common. So just to kind of point that out for you. Any questions? All right. I will get myself out of this screen into my next presentation.
All right, yeah, we'll move on to 3A, see what that biennial budget implications are for us. I was eager to hear this one.
So let me just preface this part of the conversation as we kind of continue to work through our biennial budget for next year or two here. Please note that again, these are still moving opportunities in our school district. Naturally, we worked through the deficit budget last year, and now of course we're running into another conversation around kind of where we want to be at for our budget. We are still building that budget. We're not completed with that budget yet, but this year's state implications. There are some definite, unfortunately, some things that we will have to, kind of work through over the next year or two here. What's hard for me to kind of explain at times is there's not a bank here in the school district of Beloit. The money comes from the state, and we have to allow the state funds to operate our school district, right? And we are a highly aided school district as well. With that being stated, every budget is different, and this biennial budget here that was signed does have some definite unfortunate situations for the school district of Beloit. I want to go on record and making sure that's, something that we're going to stay here. You're going to hear Mr. Chady explain the majority of that conversation, but please note that this budget, as it's been signed, necessarily doesn't help us in a lot of different ways. And so as we kind of work through this biennial budget, there's still going to take some creativity on the district's behalf to make sure that we can actually make it through these next year or two here. I always say a year or two because you kind of think ahead of with budgets. And so that's going to be something that we kind of will have to work our way through, unless some other things change, of course, down the road with different opportunities that we may have to make a decision here at the board level. My hopes is that as we kind of work through this conversation, that we keep our minds open to the different opportunities that we have. I know we're going to have some challenges naturally, but we got to think on both sides of it, right? That's how that's how I get through thinking about what we actually going to have to deal with and possibly where I can, make an impact as it pertains to savings. So if I stayed on the one side of, this budget's not going to work for me, my other side of my brain won't look at the possibilities of what we can do differently here in the school district. And so I would ask that the board remember that, we're working through it naturally. There's going to be some definite conversations that we're going to have here, but there's also some opportunities that we can possibly still work through here in our school district, and both will hopefully balance itself out, kind of like it did this year with me coming in and working through it, and we'll see where we actually are going to be another year or two ahead of ourselves. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Chady, and again, he'll take us through the budget implications for this year. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So really, over the last 4 to 6 weeks, there's been a couple of very significant pieces of legislation that have moved through the legislature, signed by the governor. So we want to talk a little bit about that and kind of share some of the implications from what we see on the school district of Beloit. So we'll kind of get into that. My intent today is really to provide an update to the committee, to the school board, district staff, parents, and the community of the implications of these recent state legislation and the impacts on the school district of Beloit and our budget and finances. I'm going to strive to leave the politics out of the presentation and concentrate more on the current law. And I'll emphasize current law because there was some outcomes of the governor's line item veto that had some creativity that extends some resources beyond the current biennial budget process, and I'm not going to get into that. That's for others to comment on. But man, a lot of activity. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you tonight was gathered from some various sources, one being the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. They hold a capital chat every Friday at noon that kind of give an update on what's going on in the state budget process. That began back in February, and it was fairly regular in attending those, but they did their last one on July 7th, and it was very insightful, provided good guidance and direction, understanding for school districts. And then also the School Administrators Alliance has a budget recap that we're also kind of relying upon. So the two pieces of legislation, 2023 Wisconsin Act 11. This was the local government revenue sharing agreement that was reached by the governor's office and the legislature. In that legislation, it increases the low revenue limit ceiling and increases per pupil payments to support the educational needs of district residents attending elsewhere. We'll get into what that all means in just a couple of slides, but just to kind of set that stage. And then the other piece of legislation that we're looking at is 2023 Wisconsin Act 19, which was the 23-25 state biennial budget. Number of items there impact the school district of Beloit. It increases the revenue limit per pupil by $325 in both years of the biennium. It also removes the high poverty aid that the school district receives, increases special education reimbursement rates, increases allocation to state general education, and then some others as well. So we'll talk about all of those in a little bit more detail. So we'll start with 2023 Wisconsin Act 11, simply because it was adopted and signed by the governor first. This increases the low revenue limit ceiling to a minimum of $11,000 per student for most districts, but not all. And it also increases the per pupil payments to support the educational needs of district residents attending elsewhere through either open enrollment, through private school choice programming, or through an independent charter school. And we'll kind of get into all of those here as well. So we'll first start by talking about the increasing the low revenue limit ceiling to a minimum of $11,000 per student. A good number for you to keep in mind is that the school district of Beloit's revenue limit is essentially around $10,050 per student. So on the face of it, it would look like we would be receiving $950 per student more in revenue opportunity. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case, though. There is a there is a piece of legislation found in state statutes 121.905 sub 1 that essentially says that if a school district had a failed operational referendum during or after the 2018-19 school year, that you then are unable to utilize this increase in the low revenue limit ceiling for an opportunity for 3 school years that follow in which the referendum was held or a subsequent operational referendum is passed. So this $950 per student opportunity that should be available to Beloit is not. And we'll talk a little bit about the why. And the why of that is because our April 4th, 2023 operational referendum failed. That $950 per student is going to equate to about a loss of around $4 million in revenue annually to the school district of Beloit. So if we calculate that out, taking it out to the 26-27 school year, that's a loss of approximately $12 million in revenues to the district to support district operations, student achievement, pay, retain our staff, et cetera. However, if the district were to go to the electors and request their support in an operational referendum once again, if it's supported by the voters, then that would be restored in the year in which that revenue limit exemption through the operation referendum would take effect. So as a for example, we may not be able to recoup the full $12 million over 3 years. It may only be $8 million. Or if a operating referendum would pass in a subsequent year, it may only be $4 million. Or if no operating referendum between now and the 26-27 school year would pass in the 26-27 school year, then the low revenue limit ceiling would increase from that $10,050 to $11,000 for us. So a rather significant handcuff to the school district.
So, I want to take a moment just to pause there because, sometimes we forget that, when you're working through a school district, there's going to be opportunities for situations like this where the governor decided to do this increase. Again, we knew we were going to get something, but we also didn't know that they were going to use this provision to actually, in this case, ding us. They haven't done this before, ever. And so I just want to make sure that's also noted in the conversation. In this case, we didn't get any, warnings that they were going to look at this legislation to make any decisions like this. None of the lobbyists. So you all know this. None of the lobbyists were talking about this being a provision later in other conversations all through the year. This was not brought up. And so that's why districts like us and the 29 other school districts are in this very tough situation because we did not pass the referendum did not pass. And again, like Mr. Chady has mentioned, and I've already mentioned it as well, now we have this to work through over the course of the next, year, 2 or 3 years, depending on whether or not the board, makes a decision to go to operational referendum within the next year, 2 or 3 years, right? I try to make it simple from this perspective, and I'm gonna be a little more quicker here. The $4 million that we won't get, there's still opportunities and things that we will have to do in right-sizing our school district still moving forward. So that puts us right back in that same conversation that I had to work through again from last year, right? That's not where we want to be in, though. This would have been a huge support. This money would have been a huge support in our budget if we were to got it this year. Now it's like you have to go back and do that same type of conversations all over again. hopefully hopefully we'll have an influx of course, student registration naturally. But in case it doesn't, my mind shifts back to how am I going to get $4 million back into our budget again? Whereas that actually looks like, partner that with increases that comes with CPI. So there's some definite challenges that I'm gonna continue with Mr. Chady, and he'll go from there. But I did want to make sure people understood that this piece was not discussed in any of our legislation conversations. No one brought this up, from, I hate to say it, from our financial advisors to the lobbyists. This is just,
Right.
unfortunately, it's just one of those things.
It's one of those things that just kind of came back and caught us. Beloit is one of 28 school districts in the state that are in a similar situation where these school districts have had an operational referendum that has failed. And because they have not been able to, or not yet asked the voters to pass a subsequent operational referendum, these other, the 27 other school districts are in the same position as Beloit is, though the financial impact is probably a bit different from district to district. The other thing we'll point out about 2023 Wisconsin Act 11 is that it increases the per pupil payments to support the educational needs of district residents that are attending school elsewhere, either through open enrollment, through the private school choice program, or the independent charter schools. And just as examples, open enrollment, I would suspect that the vast majority of our open enrolled out students are likely headed to Beloit Turner, to the Clinton Community School District, or over to Orfordville Parkview. There are likely some that go to Janesville and perhaps a few other districts, but I'm fairly certain that these three are the top exits to. We also have the private school choice program, where we have a school, the Rock County Christian School, receives funding there. And then, of course, the independent charter school with the Lincoln Academy. And what that impact is, and we'll just kind of jump to the very bottom and we'll come back up to the middle chart. Because of this 2023 Wisconsin Act 11, which is now law, we anticipate that our school district expenses are going to go up by about $2.125 million annually to cover the cost of district residents who are attending school elsewhere. And if you come back up and we take a look at the chart, and in particular the yellow columns, so if we look at like the private school choice program, K-8 pupils, in this past 22-23 school year, we paid $8,399 per student, or we transferred $8,399 per student. In the 23-24, per the current law, that value increases to $9,874 per student. And if you go to the far right column, you'll see in even 24-25, it increases further to over $10,271 per student. So you can see kind of the increases there. Total cost for non-open enrolled related educational costs. These are students that are attending private school choice programs or independent charter school. For the school district of Beloit here in the most recent 22-23 school year was just under 5.6 million. We anticipate that that will increase to 7.7 million. So again, that increase of over $2,125,000 to support those students that are attending elsewhere. Kind of a big picture summary of 2023 Wisconsin Act 11. Again, as a result of the failed April 23 referendum, we miss out on the opportunity to utilize about $4 million in additional revenues each year over the next 3 years. As a result of those per pupil payment increases to support district residents that are attending school elsewhere, our expenses are anticipated to go up by about $2,125,000. So it presents a unique challenge where our net negative impact to the school district of Beloit is around $6,125,000. Not good. We'll turn our attention to the 22-23 state biennial budget. Really kind of the four high-level items therein that impact the school district of Beloit is one, all districts will receive a $325 per pupil increase in the revenue limit in the 23-24 and the 24-25 school year. So long as they are below the $11,000 low revenue limit ceiling, we don't necessarily have to worry too much about that the latter portion of that. We'll come back to the 325 in just a little bit. Through the legislature, they struck the allocation, the state allocation to high poverty aid. That program remains, but it's not funded by the state. Kind of an interesting thing. So the category is there, it's still in state law, but there is no state resources directed to supporting that. And again, we'll talk about the implications to Beloit on that in just a minute. Special ed aid reimbursement rate increases to 33.3%. Currently, it's at 31 point something percent, so it's about a 2% increase. We'll see how significant that is to us. And then finally, the state did increase the allocation in state general aid, otherwise known as equalization aid, and we'll see that also. So we'll talk first about that $325 per pupil increase in the revenue limit in both the 23-24 and 24-25 school year. We'll jump to the bullets, and my comment there is, while that sounds beneficial, the impact on school districts varies, and we'll talk about the impact then on the school district of Beloit. A true $325 per pupil increase for the school district of Beloit would provide an approximate $3,260,000 in additional revenues. That would be a good thing. However, that's not how it works in the revenue limit formula. Within the revenue limit formula, the $325 per pupil is expected to eliminate our hold harmless exemption, which is about $1,860,000. The actual net result when we increase or put the $325 per pupil into the revenue limit formula, unfortunately, it results in a reduction in our revenue limit by $166,000. I don't think I have anything good yet to say, but we're getting to a little bit of good. So, number two, talk about the high poverty aid. Again, that category remains in the legislature. It is law. However, the state elected not to fund that this year, and instead has directed that funding to the general aid, the equalization aid component. Just to point out that we received $341,146 in high poverty aid in the 22-23 school year. Again, the state budget eliminated that, though it retained the program. It's interesting that the high poverty aid actually falls within the revenue limit calculation. So that loss in revenues will either be offset by one of two or a combination of things, either an increase in state equalization aid, more money coming to us from the state, and we'll kind of see if that's a possibility, or it will end up increasing the property tax base as well. So because it's within the revenue limit is essentially property taxes and state aid. So it kind of balances out there. Point number three talks about the special education aid reimbursement increasing to 33.3%. Special education categorical aid is a process whereby the state reimburses districts for a percentage of their actual costs related to the provision of services to students with disabilities in the prior school year. So in 22-23, our state special ed categorical aid, we received $4,417,008. That was actually based upon our 21-22 special education expenses. When we estimate out then what our 23-24 special ed categorical aid might be based upon 22-23 special ed expenses, it appears to me that we're in that $4,684,350 ballpark. So that will actually increase our special ed revenues by $267,350, which then provides us the opportunity to reduce our transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 27 as well. So that is a benefit. And then the last item that we'll talk about, that's supposed to be number 4 and not number 3 again. The state increased their allocation for general state aid or equalization aid. And of course, general aid, equalization aid is a key component within the revenue limit formula and helps to offset the local property tax burden. Just to put some dollar values to this for you, in the 22-23 school year, this most recent school year, we received just under $68 million in state aid for the school district of Beloit. In 23-24, the July 1st aid estimate from the DPI was just over $63 million. So their estimate is that we'll receive about $5 million less in state aid, though the estimate number is never right. It always changes between July 1st and when the state certifies that October 15th final aid amount. So it always changes. It's based on our expense activity, all of our financial activity actually in the most recent year, the 22-23 school year, not just for Beloit, but for all the other school districts in the state as well. So the state's got to gather all of that data, rerun it through the aid formula, and then they certify a final amount on October 15th, and that's why that value always changes from year to year. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Chady for the presentation. As we work through this again, my hopes for our school district is that we, look at the whole picture again. We know that there's some opportunities that we didn't get from the state this year, but also know that there's some possible opportunities in our district that we'll still work through to see where we, can land. Of course, I never make any promises and none like that as it pertains to what we can do and what we won't do, but as we work through this, just know that that's an ongoing conversation. Thank you again, Mr. Chady, for your presentation.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. And one last thing, this presentation, of course, Mr. Chady just did the recording. I will also probably bring it back to the full board for an additional conversation.
All right, we're good. Thank you, Mr. Chady. No other
Yes.
questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's no other questions. We'll move on then.
Point of clarity, we do need to go back and approve the financials for the first presentation.
Boy, between you and Ms. Shope, somebody's got to keep an eye on me. I would entertain a motion to approve recommendation of the financials to the full board,
So moved.
and I will second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to item 3B. Mr. Chady?
Yeah, so I wanted to give the board an update on where we're at with our long-range facility master planning process. We kind of kicked that off earlier this spring. We are to the point now where we need to work to identify a construction manager firm to help provide financial or cost estimates for various improvements to some of the projects that might be forthcoming. So we recently released a request for qualifications that was in the board packet, and it's available here. I'm just going to kind of scale through to the very last portion of it and put the schedule or the timeline up for you. Here we go. So we released the qualifications on Friday of the 30th of June. We actually had a pre-submittal conference. So let me back up, my apologies. So we not only did we release the RFQ, but we identified 11 construction management firms in the state that we intentionally sent it to. So we did our part to reach out to a number of parties to participate. Part of the process is the pre-submittal conference that was held yesterday virtually. Any party that was interested in pursuing and becoming a construction manager for these projects was required to attend that conference. So while I was online, I was escorting our director of facility candidate throughout campus. So I know some of the firms because I recognize the names, but I don't know of the 11 how many of the firms were actually present. We actually have an owner's rep, Cadence Consulting, that's helping facilitate this, given some absence in the facilities department currently. But I can find out how many of those firms actually attended. Going forward, there were some questions that some of the firms had. They will be submitting those to Cadence Consulting by 2 p.m. tomorrow. And then Michael Hacker, the architect with Cadence Consulting, and I will be communicating tomorrow afternoon, early Thursday morning to address those questions, to get that information back to the firms that have indicated their desire to participate. And then they will be submitting to us kind of their proposed packet on Monday, the 17th of July by 2 p.m. Thereafter, Cadence Consulting and the district will kind of review those materials that were submitted and identify a short list, kind of identify which firms we're really interested in learning more about, perhaps, to serve as our construction manager. And then we'll be doing interviews of those firms, and then that the selected firm should be coming back to the Board of Education for adoption, maybe late August, perhaps into the September timeframe. Please keep in mind that there's been no decisions yet as to what projects we're moving forward with. We've had architects through looking at the educational spaces of all of our schools here the last really throughout May into early June. And beginning tomorrow, we'll have architects and engineers coming back through looking at schools from a capital perspective. What's our building envelope look like, our masonry, our roofs? What's the internal organs, the plumbing, the electrical, the mechanical look like? Where are there deficiencies and needs for improvement or replacement? Also looking at outdoor spaces from parking lots to playgrounds. So all of those needs will be identified, and then we'll be coming back to the board in the fall. The key component of having the construction manager on board, the architects can identify what needs to be done. They can kind of design out what it should look like, but an architect doesn't really know how much it's going to cost. That's where the construction company comes into play. They're the ones that are going to be sourcing the materials, identifying the labor that's needed, necessary to make that project happen. So you get your construction manager to work with your architect hand in hand throughout the process, and that's really kind of where we're at right now. So just again, wanted to provide a board an update on where we're at with that long-range facility master planning process, the release of the RFQ, and a heads up that it'll be coming back to you in a few months for approval. Any questions? I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. We'll look forward to
Thank
hearing
you.
more. All right. Move on to meeting closing. Our next meeting date, some dates are still in flux, so I will get back to you, but it's likely will be 3 weeks from today, I would think, would be put us back on schedule, but we'll obviously post that, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? We are adjourned.
So I'm going to call to order a special board meeting at 6:06 PM. Mr. Shope, could we have a call to order, a roll call, please?
Yes. Greg Schneider,
Present.
Amy Levy,
Here.
Megan Miller,
Present.
Brian Anderson,
Here?
Brian Nichols,
Here.
and Sean Levy.
Present.
All members are present and in the boardroom.
Have a motion for the approval of the agenda,
So moved.
Second.
moved by Board Member Greg Schneider and seconded by Board Member Megan Miller. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, and we are, our first interview is scheduled for 6:05. The interviews are 30 minutes long. And so do we have our applicant, Victoria Burton? Okay. So since Ms. Burton is not here, I mean, the time is going to come out of the interview for right now, but we'll just kind of go into recess until the candidate appears or it's time to have the next interview.
Sounds good.
And we'll come out after. All right. Okay, so we'll be returning from recess at 6:12, and our next interview is scheduled at 6:40. So we'll use the balance of time in between and move from this space. All right, you set? Okay. All right. So we'll just go, we'll go this direction.
Would you like a paper copy, Megan? I have extra.
I grabbed the wrong place, but yeah, sorry, I'm here to help everybody out. You are so thoughtful.
We'll start with number one. Victoria, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, your education, your work experience, hobbies, and any other information that you'd like to share, and tell us why you should be appointed to the Board of Education.
Well, greetings. Thank you all for having me. Gotta breathe a little bit. Just coming out as kids, getting out of YMCA, me working with early child education. Kind of breathing a little bit. My name is Veronica Burton, not Victoria. Veronica. Veronica Burton.
Thank you for that correction.
Alrighty. Well, I'm a mother of 3 grown kids. My background is Homeland Security, coming from a background from the South. I graduated Torrance Information System, graduated Torrance High School in Memphis, Tennessee. From there, moving back north, went through business school. I have a degree in Business Tech A+ certification and worked with Homeland Security. With that education, I started working with Torrance Information System, which got employed with the city of Chicago, dealing with the police department, taking the IDs, and then after that, I got employed with Catholic Charities. Catholic Charity, which involves the WIC program, the Women, Infantry, and Children program. So that was within my younger years, working with Homeland Security, which before Homeland Security was Department of Transportation, before the 9/11. So that's what kind of went through the governmental phase of that. From there, basically traveled a lot with my 3 kids, grown 3 kids now. Thank God, gratefully they're good, and with the grace of God now, I have 4 little kids, 4 younger kids because of the issue with the COVID, with passing of the family, so me being the TTD aunt, which got me involved with earlyhood child education, starting over again with the earlyhood child education. It was a shocker. It was a lot of crying of me going through those emotions again, but I got through. By being a parent through earlyhood child education, being involved with those things, what I did with my younger kids, when you have to be involved as a parent, a caregiver, a guardian, you have to be involved with everything your child do. I believe, coming from the South, I believe it takes a village to raise a family, and we cannot do anything by ourselves. Nothing whatsoever. And between that, I become being involved. I was asked, you're here all the time, can you volunteer? Doing a volunteer to school. Being involved with the kids, I become a member of the parent council. Over the years, after becoming a parent council, I become a chair or a parent council. And when being involved with the decision-making of the early ECE, Rock County, Walworth, with over years and things. But in between that, as time grow, you grow. As you get around more and with the kids, I become more not only a law effective behind me. I have 3 young, older kids. They're all in law enforcement. And me, my background of Homeland Security, it was like a completely beginning. So I had to decide upon my own to take those ECE classes, which I thought was very important. After me taking those classes, I thought, personally, in me, internally, I thought I was a bad parent, not knowing that children learn through play, You know, as you take those classes, you learn those different things, you know, and I know my kids are good, you know, they become successful, but you start looking at things as younger, you have become, basically I look at things different. You have to look at those kings, look at things as a child. We all were children when we were younger. And let's do things by love. And by doing that, I got involved more and more, had to get off the board as a chairperson because I became an employee. So now that's where I am, that's where I'm employed there. So I'm involved with, that was my, I can sit here, that was one question. So I'm gonna cut it off. I can tell you a whole thing and all the questions will be asked in one blown, you know, conversation. So I'll just stop there. So that's my education, so yeah. So that's how I end up being here.
Hi, thank you so much for coming this evening, and it's really nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Recognizing that last year on the state report card, the district increased from a 1-star, fails to meet expectations, to 2 stars, meets few expectations. How do you define growth? What do you believe are the strengths of the school district of Beloit?
Well, I have my own questions in written on paper, give you all a copy of that, but I'm gonna tell you as far as me personally. One thing is growth, I can look at myself, me. Remind you, I have a background of, you know, law, you know, but now a background of education, ECE, that's growth. And going back and look at those babies, I have been the reason how I got custody of those 4 kids, a 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-old because of death, and did a lot of crying. And those kids will make you feel amazing. So that's why I think it's important to that. That's one growth. But within a personal development, 2 primary mindsets, there's a difference between growth. Some people will look at growth, it's 2 different types of growth. Let me calm down. Some people will look at growth as a negative and a positive. Some are afraid to build growth because they are afraid of the unseen, that have never seen it before. But if you stay at one point, you're never going. You have to continue on growing like a tree. Everything has to grow and everything needs to be watered. That's growth. You take that in mind. So I'm speaking of me, but I have, once again, written things that I'll give everyone. I'm just speaking internally. That's how I truly feel in my heart. That's how it's 2 ways mindset of looking at growth. Growth is taking a look at a tree. It has to be watered. We all have grown. We have learned to tie our shoes. That's a child walking. You have to walk, learn to walk first, and then you grow into driving a car. That's growth and achievements of growth. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Question 3. How are you engaged in our community, and is any of your experience relevant to serving on the Board of Education? The second part, how do you feel the Board of Education can better engage our stakeholders?
Well, I have served on the Early Childhood Start Board. I have served on the Early Child Education Board and the chair, not with the Board of Education. I'll say that first. I'm a parent of 4 that attends the school district of Beloit. As an active community member, I devote my time and efforts to volunteer with various communications around Rock and Werver County, like food pantries, clothing pantries. I have helped with the Toys for Tots for over the years from Janesville and helping with the churches. So there's a number of things I have, even inside the school, I have volunteered. I'm a parent volunteer inside the school. And as far as the stakeholders, inclusive and extensive research is critical. And it's important to involve the local community, other organizations, residency groups, faith communities, to determine a strategy to look at what the common goal is. I don't want to say what the end mission is, because I'll start going military. The end mission. We all are here for one common goal for the kids, the babies. So there's ways of us looking at different stakeholders. Not we have to go out to look at different types of resources. There's plenty of resources that a lot of us don't know, and we have to share with them. That's one thing. And I think it's important for us to do the research and the data to make sure that it's done for the common good of the babies, no matter what the babies. I didn't expect this also. Please, I'm trying to breathe a little bit. Please forgive me. Thanks.
Okay, question number 4. Again, a two-part question. In some situations, you may be asked to accept the reality that is contrary to your own beliefs. As a Board of Education member, you may cast a minority vote on an issue passed by the majority of the Board of Education. What would your reaction be in this situation?
As a former member and chair of the Parent Council of the Head Start for several years, I firmly believe that it takes a family to raise a village that involves working with the community, including individuals with diverse ideas and beliefs, to foster growth. Once again, no one can do it on their own. And it's essential to show respect and understanding toward others' thoughts and feelings. No one can accomplish anything alone, and it takes a team effort to determine what's best for the children of the Beloit School District, what's including and promoting inclusion, respect. That's the most important. And that's what I personally believe that's what's wrong. We have to listen to each other and common ground. We all think the same. We were taught as little kids, we have our own mind. Those 4 and 5-year-olds, 4 and 5, I'm teaching them right now, you can think for yourself. You don't have to do what your sisters say, but is it for the common good? Is it safe? Is it okay? That's how I feel. With respecting others' feelings, with no pushback. Everyone has their own opinion. But once again, if it's for our common ground, that one mission, and it's a mission accomplished for those babies. That's it, that's all.
Veronica, thank you for being here. Question number 5. As a Board of Education member, you will receive input from people representing special groups or interests. How do you plan to use this information in decision-making and encourage them to direct the issue to the proper staff member?
Any input or information that is received should be shared with other board members. It should be thoroughly examined and researched to determine whether it would be beneficial or harmful to the Beloit School District or its program and students. Based on a type of information shared, it should be directed to the appropriate staff member. For instance, something about health, it should go to the health management. That's one prime example that I feel. And it should be, next one, okay. No decision should be made with bias and informed perspective. It should be done collectively and with all board members.
Thank you.
Okay, Veronica, thanks for coming tonight. I've got an easy question for you.
Thank you.
In your opinion, what should the relationship between the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools be like?
To build a strong board superintendent relationship, it involves input from various community members, establish shared vision, and clarification of responsibilities. Prioritizing student achievements and mutual respect, but flexibility and cooperation kind of complex, and accountability is key for everyone. Because I'm a kind of a sports girl. My son played sports. We all a sports girl. Everyone has a role. And if one person not doing their job, everyone falls down.
What do you think are the most pressing challenges facing the school district of Beloit? And what do you think the Board of Education should do to address these challenges?
Where do we begin? We can be here all night, but I'm kind of shortening it up a little bit. Poverty, family issues, lack of resources can lead to students' negative experiences and other roadblocks that can stop success or failure within the schools. Technology can both help and distract the classroom. I learned that the hard way because I had to put a parent app, too much screen time. Some screen time is okay for educational apps, but some kids, we have too much. So technology can be pros and cons. And I believe in No Child Left Behind. Once again, it's a military base. I'm sorry, guys, Lord Jesus. I believe in No Child Left Behind, once again, military. Where I go, you go, we fall together. That's how I feel. And beyond policies and teachers' evaluations based on test scores, pressures, the education systems. Parent involvement, that's a big thing, more parent involvement. And food, and promoting physical activities in school. And I personally, I'm gonna go just personally, me and my personal thoughts, and I'm going off the rim, music and more fine arts. Because not every child just knows sports. Like my oldest daughter, she was playing the piano as a young girl. Fine arts. Educate our kids' mind more than what the norm is. There's a bigger world out there, and time is changing. And we all know resources, funding. We all know that not just here, that's in the U.S., period. Completely, that's everywhere. Short teacher staff funding. And thank God that we do have good teachers and staff members that truly love the babies, because it's definitely a lot to pay. I'm a prime example. So it's not just a problem here, it's all over the country, funding and the resources. And we have to somehow work together, one man, one band, one sound, for the common mission to see what we can do. But it can't take one person. We all have to do what we can. We all can change. Once again, I believe in the sports. We're a sports team. That's it.
Thank you. What responsibility do Board of Education members have for learning environments in our schools?
Representing the community, overseeing the district education, financial management, and working with the superintendent, make sure the legal and local policies focus on education outcomes. And understanding. That's it.
Thank you.
What is your understanding of the School District of Beloit's current financial situation? What are your thoughts on how to address this situation?
I can go back to 3 questions you just asked again. reflects on that, not just here, public school system in America, but significant issue due to budget cuts, smaller staffings, fewer resources, limited student services, identifying these issues, finding solutions that benefit all students, that is essential. But there are teachers, once again, and staff that genuinely care. No one can do it by themselves.
Okay. Number 10, are you able to commit to a minimum of 2 nights per month for board meetings and possibly extra days for special meetings? Are you comfortable with reading documents thoroughly for comprehension, sometimes in a short time frame, and arriving at meetings fully prepared to professionally engage and execute the business of the school district of Beloit? And part 3, how do you plan to manage your schedule to make this happen?
Well, as I stated, I was on a parent council and the board for years, became the chairperson. I made the decisions of the earlyhood child education there. And there were a number of documents and things that I have to read and look over as far as it budgeting, and even including the COVID policies there. And that was a trying time then too, because we all know that issue and time, during that time, those issues. So I have done it, and I can do it. And it's very important to schedule with 15 minutes increments or 30-minute increments. You know, you have to get your life boards and get your calendars, you know. So we all know that. So every minute means something. There's a lot you can do in 1 minute. I learned that through life, past experience, through starting over again in life with the babies, the 4 babies, was a shocker. And you have to keep going because you have to teach them the meaning of time and how important this is. So if you can't schedule yourself and get your schedule together, it's okay. That's going back to circle time. Everyone knows about the circle time on the board and a time frame. So that's very important. Yeah. Whew. I'm gonna breathe a little bit now.
Right, we made it to the end. Those are the questions that we have. Our process tonight is to receive all the interviews, and then there's a deliberation and a voting that we'll have after we've had all the interviews, and we'll be communicating. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so our next interview is Andrea Cleland, our 640 interview. Ms. Cleland, we're going to go through our questions and give you the opportunity to welcome, to answer the questions and present yourself to the board. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, your education, your work experience, hobbies, and any other information you'd like to share, and tell us why you should be appointed to the Board of Education?
I'm on.
No, you're right.
Now I'm on. Okay. So, Andrea Cleland. I've lived in Beloit for 20-some years. Education, I guess I'll start there. I grew up in a tiny place, very different than Beloit, so I've chosen Beloit for multiple reasons, beginning with the school district. Grew up in central Wisconsin, tiny place, Plainfield. From there, I went to Platteville. I have bachelor's degrees in criminal justice and psychology. And my focus from there was corrections, specifically juvenile corrections was what I really wanted to work in. Law enforcement, juvenile corrections. I decided shortly after getting both of my bachelor's degrees that that was not for me, so I kind of was lost for a little bit. And I had applied for master's degrees, but that was not what I wanted to do, though I loved school. I did not want to continue at that point in time, and ended up at Madison for my master's degree, where I had only applied because somebody told me I could not get in. Something about me is that I'm pretty competitive. And so I ended up at Madison with a master's in social work. I went there and had originally gone into their social work and corrections because that's what I had gotten with my undergrad. And when I was there, they were offering a new program in social work, which was the Title IV program for child welfare. And it was an opportunity to go for 2 years for free if you were willing to work in child welfare, which, very sad to say that after 4 years, 2 bachelor's degrees, and focusing on juvenile corrections, I had no idea what child welfare was. But I said, hey, 2 years, I can do anything, and I'll continue, and I'll go to school for free. So I ended up there as an accident. Nothing's an accident. I ended up there on purpose, for some purpose, and have been in child welfare ever since. And from there, my contract was to work for Rock County to pay back my 2 years, and I was a child protection social worker in Rock County for 17 years, where I did a little bit of everything. Excess initial assessment and ongoing, and that's where I fell in love with Beloit and why I chose Beloit as my home for my family, my children. And that was falling in love with the school district here. I've worked in all of the school districts in the county as a child protection worker, and I chose here because we worked together really well, or we did at that point in time for those 15, 17 years. And I moved from Rock County to UW-Madison, where I work now as a instructional designer, curriculum writer, and trainer for continuing education hours in the School of Social Work for child protection workers across the state. So that's what I am doing now for UW-Madison. I also do contract work with the Department of Child and Family Services for whatever they ask me to do. I do case reviews for them, and then if they have other things that they want me to do, I am on their payroll separate for UW-Madison in the work we do for them. Hobbies. I am a social worker, so working with people and helping people out is a hobby. I do advocacy in healthcare with people, and I also do a lot of community service work as my hobby. Hobby, however you want to take that. I do work in my church, volunteer. I coach youth sports. My children are very involved in sports, and we travel and do lots of things as a family. So sports, working with children, doing lots of things in the community is my hobby. And should I be appointed, or should you like me, I think my experience with the community, continuing to be involved. As a touch point, people often come to me looking for problem solving, asking about what's going on, and I'm very connected. People have asked me to come here and apply. And people have asked me what's going on as a touch point and what they should think about the issues that we're having in the city and in the school district. And I'm a conversationalist with people, and I'm very open and honest. And I don't pick sides. I'm also a facilitator. Conversation is part of my job. I'm impartial. I really don't. I pick sides if I have to, but I don't have feelings associated with them, if that makes sense. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here this evening and being willing to serve. Recognizing that last year on the state report card, the district increased from a 1-star, fails to meet expectations, to 2 stars, meets few expectations. How do you define growth? And then the part 2 of that question, what do you believe are the strengths of the school district of Beloit?
First and foremost, I recognize that going from fails to meet expectations to meeting some is big and a lot of work by a lot of people. Now, this is also going to be kind of backwards. I may not follow the rules all of the time, if you will. How do I define growth is also how I don't define growth, right? When we're talking about the definition of growth, I don't see it in standardized tests. I don't see it in the marks as the DPI would define this. I see it in classrooms. I see it in how children gain knowledge, how they gain confidence, how they gain in the ability to regurgitate, reproduce, and be able to take next steps in what they're doing every day and retain it. You've heard me just say that I had 6 years of school. Well, many more than that. As a professional, I have to go through continuing education hours. I can cram and take a standardized test like nobody's business. But I also know in that endeavor, you may come to me a couple of weeks later, and I may not be able to reproduce what you need on that standardized test. And growth in education means that we are retaining and being able to continue to reproduce and teach each other and grow on that every single day, every single year, and have our children meet those kinds of litmus tests as they go through their education. And I think that that's really important, that we experiment, that we try, that we continue to provide those opportunities, and that children can feel expert in those opportunities and endeavors. I do recognize the need for standardized testing, don't get me wrong, but I don't feel that it is fair or equitable that across the state, every single school is held to that same standard of that test, because we're all different, regionally, in our cities, in our makeups. That would be how I would define growth.
Thank you.
How are you engaged in our community? And is any of your experience relevant to serving on the Board of Education? How do you feel the Board of Education can better engage our stakeholders?
Engagement in the community. I have, start with my work in the community with children and their families. We have, my husband and I, our children, I've coached many different sports through the Y over the years. I've stayed connected with the children and their families. It's not uncommon that kids will come back to us and say, hey, I need to tweak, or hey, can we have a pickup game of this, or hey, can we meet you here and play. I am also a member of OLA church in our community, and I teach faith formation. So I am working with children and their families in that aspect all year long. And in that, I'm also working with families and hearing what they need and trying to also continue and be invested in different ways, not just with my own children, but with other people's children and their families. My former work also, in terms of community engagement, gives me a different knowledge, a different experience of engagement with our community and also with professionals in our community, other partners in the community, in terms of how I feel with the Board of Education and better engagement with stakeholders. I think that there's always an opportunity for, I don't even want to say better, different avenues of communication, because I'm not going to be critical. I don't know all the ins and outs of how communication is handled, how things in terms of engagement is handled, and honestly, I don't know all the rules. I think that we are in a time where we can be creative or look to be creative in how we engage stakeholders and how we ask stakeholders to be engaged with us. And I think that in general, coming out of a period of time where we were at home with COVID, in a period of time where we have different politics at play, in a different time when we have different technology available to us, when we've learned so many things, I think every place is ripe and able to look at different ways that we engage people. I know that we're experiencing it in our work. I think that there's that opportunity to look at what has worked, what hasn't worked, how can we tweak how we engage everybody to come to the table and sit with each other differently. So that's what I would say about that. I'm not going to be critical at all. I'm going to say the world is wide open for a difference in looking at what we need and how we need different engagement, period.
Good, thank you. In some situations, you may be asked to accept a reality that is contrary to your own belief. As a Board of Education member, you may cast a minority vote on an issue passed by the majority of the Board of Education. What would your reaction be in this situation?
You mean I won't always get my way? What I say is you get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right? And that's the best anybody can do. That's why we have a democracy. That's why you vote. You can talk about why you think something is the best, and then you acquiesce if it doesn't go your way. And you get behind what the vote is, and you support what the decision has been made and what it is. And you don't undermine what your peers have decided. And you don't allow other people to do that either. I will jump ahead just a little bit, and I will say that I also think that that is a problem in our community and with how our board has been perceived. Again, I'm not saying that that are things that have happened, but I think in the turnover in the board, if we haven't gotten our way, perhaps that's what the impression is that you haven't gotten your way, and then that's why people leave, and that's not acceptable. You make a commitment, and you don't take a seat to get your way. That's not how this is, and that's not how I would expect for it to be. I am a social worker. We work together in the business that I come from, and we do our best to make the case, if you will, and come to an agreement that works for everybody. And if we can't have an agreement that works for everybody, we mend the fence before we leave the building and make it work, because we've got to come back and do it the next time too.
Thank you for being here, Andrea. As a Board of Education member, you will receive from time to time input from people representing special groups or interests. How do you plan to use this information in decision-making and encourage them to direct the issue to the proper staff member?
I believe that there's policies around how that works, and policies are there for a reason. I believe that we, you as a board, we listen, right? You listen to people who come to you and talk without the implication that you're taking a side or that you're going to do what somebody says that you're going to do. I've talked to a number of you. And when I have brought anything to a board member, I've never left with the feeling that I'm going to get what I want or that that's how this works. And I think our community needs to understand that as well. I also think that there's a starting point for all issues, and most of them don't come to the board first. And I think that that's where I would also be encouraging folks that start where the issue needs to start, whether it's in a classroom or with the superintendent or somewhere else, and really get on the pathways of what needs to be the direction and the way where things need to go, because everybody does have a job here, and we need space to do those jobs. And I think hearing people is really important, but not giving any kind of an indication that hearing also means that I'm siding with or that anybody is siding with somebody, because I think that hurts relationships and that makes people angry, and that is how we have the division that we're often seeing, because people think that they're getting something that they're not. And that's also things that I've heard too, and that needs to be part of our relationship mending. I think that educating people about how that works and how it doesn't work would be one of the things that I would say in response to that question. And then information about how decisions are made. Exactly. One person doesn't make the decision. There's several people and processes that are at play there.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. Thanks for being here, Andrea. The question I have for you, in your opinion, what should be the relationship between the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools?
They're not the same. So board is policy. Board is ultimate budget oversight and making sure that there is enough. Board is also responsible for endpoint decisions. I think endpoint and some of the beginning decisions. I think superintendent is day-to-day operations and bringing policy recommendations to the board. And I think that keeping most of those, keeping them separate is really important, because if we don't have separate avenues, then we're doubling up on the jobs. I think the superintendent's job is day-to-day taking care of staff, taking care of the buildings, taking care of students. And then endpoint, when I said that, I should probably clarify that. So things that need to come up to the level, ultimate discipline, HR, those kinds of things need to come to the board, because that's the stopping point, right? The ultimate, when we're talking about budgets, hiring, those kinds of things, is that here at the board level. So ultimate money, the big budget, those types of things, and policies and policy changes is up to board, and then day-to-day operations and oversight is superintendent.
What do you think are the most pressing challenges facing the school district of Beloit? And what do you think the Board of Education should do to address these challenges?
Boy, I wish I had the referendum talks in front of me to go through some of those. I think our budget, I think our losing students, I think communication. I think they all go hand in hand. And I think what I mean, to clarify communication, I think that PR. I think that if we could get ahead of the good news and get that out there, more things would fall into place. And I'm not intending to be critical, but I think that there are more for whatever reason, people, groups in the community that wish to put bad news out there and be critical with parts of information that isn't all true, that are not overwhelmingly big experiences of many families, that gets momentum, that creates sometimes a lot of drama that is not what a large group of families are experiencing, and there isn't the opportunity for the rebuttal, honestly, of that's not happening here, or other families aren't saying the rebuttal to that. Some of us are out there saying that's not the things that are happening in all of these places, or it's not happening like that. And I think if we had just as equal and loud voices of the very good things that are happening, it would balance some of that. And I think if we were balancing all of our good opportunities, our good programs, the things that are out there that we have, it would change the terrain of where our students are going, where their families are choosing to go, and it would start to look like the district did a few years ago. And that snowball effect would not be as much as we see it happening. Because drama begets drama. And if it can be good drama.
Just a follow-up. I think I'm going to ask her about the question she just, about an answer to the question. When you say rebut, because it's, it says like, what should the board do to address that challenge? Their social media post, but what do you think the board as a board should do? Is like, as you identified that as a challenge, how would you address that as a board, or propose that a board address a social media post that might be inaccurate?
And again, maybe there's rules about not being able to do that, but I tend to be a person that hits things pretty head on. And if it's not true and you can say it, I would say it's not true. If there aren't legalities that are in place that permits or prohibits that from happening, if it's not true, it's not true. And I would put that out there. Or encourage it to be put out there. Because otherwise, if you're not doing that, then it has to be true. Or somewhat true.
Thank you. What responsibility do Board of Education members have for learning environments in our schools?
The board is responsible for ensuring that the environment is safe, that we have money for operations. The board has to ensure that there's opportunity for, that we have staff, that we have the ability to have day-to-day operations for the superintendent and his staff to take care of that. It has to be responsive to those needs.
Thank you.
What is your understanding of the School District of Beloit's current financial situation? What are your thoughts on how to address the situation?
Given the request for the referendum, we are in a state where we need to have money to work on operations, or that we're going to need that and revisit that issue, is my current understanding. My thoughts on how to address the situation is that we probably should be talking about it and continuing to plan for that right now. My understanding from a community perspective is that we were kind of close and that there are people out there who want to support that but need direction. And so we have an opportunity to be having those conversations and moving towards that. Part of that good opportunity, good news, what do we need, good communication and momentum, because it was close. And there still is a need. That did not go away. In fact, it probably is more because we had to do with what we had, which creates less than what we had. And there are people who are interested, who want to help, that care about our children, that wanted that to succeed, and they're still out there. And so one of the things that I would be working on right now is discussing, looking for those people and letting them mobilize and work on it. They're there. They want this. They want to do it for our children, and they want to work. Those people are out there. And then figuring out whatever other creative opportunities we have, because again, it's a brave new world. There's opportunities out there to think like we've never thought before to make things happen. People make it happen all the time.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you able to commit a minimum of 2 nights per month for board meetings and possibly extra days for special meetings? Are you comfortable reading documents thoroughly for comprehension, sometimes in a short time frame, and arriving at meetings fully prepared to professionally engage and execute the business of the school district of Beloit? And how do you plan to manage your schedule to make this happen?
I'm very transparent, very honest. The work that I do does put me away in different parts of the state. This would be my only hang-up, and 2 active children, but the job is the thing. Part of my work means that I do travel around the state in the middle of the week. So I don't know what flexibility or what options there are. So that is a consideration you have to make. There may be times when I am gone because my job requires it of me. And that's once, maybe twice a month at times. I have 0 problems reading documents, doing it in short term, being prepared. It's what that's what my job is. So that isn't a problem for me, but if my job requires me to be in Turtle Lake or in Green Bay, that's where I have to be first, because that's my first contract.
Thank you, Andrea. We'll continue with our interviews, and then we will be deliberating and voting tonight, and then we'll be in contact.
Thank you.
Your hot mic.
1 2 1 2. All right. Yeah. All right. I'm trying not to hang up. So. All right, we have our 7:15 interview, Teresa Johnson. So we'll start. I just lost a little piece of paper that had the time on it, but the interview is, we're about 30 minutes for each interview is what we scheduled. And so we'll start with questions. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your education, work experience, hobbies, and any other information you'd like to share, and tell us why you should be appointed to the Board of Education.
Sorry. Is that on? Okay. As you know, Waterman is now the New Zion Church. But I was there to second grade, and then we moved to Newark Township, where I attended Parkview Orfordville schools and graduated from that high school. I have an associate's degree in nuclear technology and one in radiation health physics, both from Lakeshore Technical College. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Beloit College, and my classes for my master's in STEM education begin the 22nd of this month. My work experience includes teaching middle school science and health during the 2021-2022 school year here in the district. I served on the Board of Education from 2009 to 2012, and I subbed for the district from 2006 to 2008. Prior to that, I was the assistant director of the Bedrock Project through the Beloit College Biology Department, where I worked on developing curricular materials that incorporate bioinformatics into undergraduate biology courses. I have been a property manager of properties here in Beloit since 2004. My hobbies during the summer, I'm an avid gardener. If you can't find me or get a hold of me, I'm out back pulling weeds or picking raspberries. During the winter, I like to put together Lego sets, watch sci-fi. Throughout the year, my family and I play games, Wordle, Spelling Bee, and to amp it up a bit, we give each other the starting word for Wordle. So on days when we're really being vicious and vindictive, kayak is a good word, those palindromes. Other information about me. I've been actively involved with the community as a member of the NAACP, League of Women Voters, the Wisconsin Health Professionals for Climate Action, and have been involved with the local JOB, Justice Overcoming Borders, and Esther branches of the Wisdom Organization. Why should I be appointed to the board? I have a lifelong interest and care in education. My very first job was tutoring for OIC, Opportunities Industrial Relations Center, a program directed by the late Walter Knight. I also taught science, math, and photography for the Upward Bound program while I was a student at Beloit College. I have been connected with the school district of Beloit as a parent, an educator, a board member, and a property owner. I have interactions with community members from many socioeconomic backgrounds, cultures, political perspectives, and other demographics. I am comfortable speaking to state and federal level politicians regarding the importance for fair funding and realistic statutes in education. I'm also comfortable talking to the homeless guy while I'm out walking to my dog.
Thank you. Recognizing that last year on the state report card, the district increased from a 1-star, fails to meet expectations, to 2 stars, meets few expectations, how do you define growth? And then the part 2 question, what do you believe are the strengths of the school district of Beloit?
I look at growth microscopically and macroscopically, knowing that any growth in one will have a positive effect on the other, and any regression in growth will have a negative effect on the other. Microscopic growth is to achieve any level in a positive direction in academics, personal, or social development of an individual or small group. For example, one day as a teacher, during my prep period, on my way to the restroom, I came across one of my more challenging students. If and when this student showed up to class, they were often destructive and distractive. This day, in the hallway, they had on a heavy, baggy winter coat, even though the weather was nice. Not expecting a response, I smiled and said, "Hey, student, how's it going?" I figured they probably didn't want to be asked about why they were not in class and roaming the halls during this period. To my surprise, they opened their coat to point out that their shirt had a stain. I noticed that the once white shirt was not only stained, but was also completely tinged dirty gray. I smiled and shared that I would often spill my coffee on my clothes on the way to work, so I always had extra shirts and clothes in my class closet. I also took the opportunity to demonstrate, even though they may think there is nothing they could do about the situation, by communicating their problem, they may find the needed resources. I gave them one of the Lancer t-shirts I had purchased for classroom prizes, let them change in private, and then showed them how with a little borax, dish soap, and wash tub, all located under the lab sink, they could hand wash their own shirt. That student never became an A student for me, but they did start attending class more regularly, with fewer disruptions, and even with a bit of a sense of belonging. I began to see growth in the students' self-confidence and interpersonal engagement. I hope that seed of self-sufficiency and self-confidence continues to grow as this student progresses through high school and beyond. One prep period was a small sacrifice to help this student grow personally in hopes they are experiencing enough support needed to achieve academic success. Growth at the macro level, community success, is moving towards equitable access for everyone to the resources and opportunities necessary to achieve self-fulfillment, self-worth, self-purpose, and self-reliability within the larger societal scope. The greatest strengths of the School District of Beloit are, bar none, its dedicated educators, its diversity, its sense of community, and its tenacity as seen in our Beloit pride.
Thank you.
How are you engaged in our community? And is any of that experience relevant to serving on the Board of Education? How do you feel the Board of Education can better engage our stakeholders?
I've been engaged in the Beloit community most of my life, from volunteering for the Elder Teen Program when I was in high school. Even though I was in Orfordville, I would come to Beloit and volunteer and help senior citizens, to being a Brownie Girl Scout leader when my daughter was little, to volunteering for different food distribution programs and organizations. I've done election poll volunteering, volunteer tutoring, even plogging, picking up trash when you're walking along in the community. All of my community experience is relevant to serving on the board. Through community engagement and building relationships with people from many different backgrounds of the community, I have wide exposure to many perspectives, cultures, and demographics. I feel the board can better engage its stakeholders by improving communications to all stakeholders, by hosting more events, such as having recognitions and awards presented during board meetings, because for some community members, just knowing they're welcomed here is the first step to get them here. And individual members can attend more schools, events, and visit classrooms.
Thank you. In some situations, you may be asked to accept a reality that is contrary to your own beliefs. As a Board of Education member, you may cast a minority vote on an issue passed by the majority of this Board of Education. What would your reaction be in this situation?
A board is composed of several people, in part to gain multiple opinions and perspectives. A healthy board does not vote 100% of the time in agreement. After a discussion and once the board approves a decision, the entire board, acting as one body, must accept and support that decision.
Thank you for being here, Tia. Do you mind if I call you Tia?
Oh, please.
Okay, thank you. As a Board of Education member, you will receive input from people representing special groups or interests in the area. How do you plan to use this information in decision-making and encourage them to direct the issue to the proper staff member?
I will listen thoroughly and completely to the person. I will ask for any additional information or data that may be important, and I will alert the superintendent of the conversation. There is a procedural chain of command that needs to be followed by everyone involved in the school district.
All right, good evening. Question 6, in your opinion, what should be the relationship between the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools?
The relationship between the board and the superintendent should be constructive, trustworthy, respectful, and honest. There should be good communication between the board and the superintendent. While both must maintain the dignity of the leadership positions, the role of the board is to set the vision and goals of the district, and the superintendent focuses on how to achieve these. More simplistically, the board sets the ends and the superintendent sets the means.
That's number 7. What do you think are the most pressing challenges facing the school district of Beloit? And what do you think the Board of Education should do to address these challenges?
Thank you for this question, President Levy. And I just want to point out that my answers on to this question address specifically the school district of Beloit. On the other sheet that we had to fill out, that was asking for education overall nationally. I think the most pressing challenges facing the district are funding and budget. This could be addressed by focusing on issues why families are choosing to leave the district, by better prioritizations of the budget, and by having another referendum. The other that plays into this is the decreasing enrollment. As privatization, tongue twister, privatization of public education increases, there will be decreasing enrollment until families feel the school district of Beloit offers the same quality or better of education and safer environments as the other school options that they may be opting out into. This may be addressed by engaging families more, asking what's working, what's not, and inviting parents or families into schools, events, and board meetings. While I was at McNeil, we had strong, excellent family engagement. Teachers would come in before school and meet with parents, attend breakfast events, and they would be there after school engaging with parents.
Thank you so much. What responsibility do Board of Education members have for learning environments in our schools? Thanks.
Well, the superintendent is responsible for the day-to-day management of the learning environments in the schools. The board, as a whole, not any one member, is responsible for setting the visions and goals of the learning environments and ensuring the superintendent is managing the district in alignment with the board's directive in achieving the visions and goals, as well in compliance with the state and federal statutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is your understanding of the School District of Beloit's current financial situation? What are your thoughts on how to address the situation?
My understanding of the district's current financial situation is that with the decrease in enrollment, the resulting decrease in funding has been the district's greatest challenge. Stagnation with the state budget surplus has also not benefited the district either. The situation is not good. To address the budget and fund balance shortages, the district needs to have a referendum to cover those costs and to remedy the reasons why families are opting out of the district. The board should begin engaging in the public in discussions regarding the next referendum right away.
Thank you. And are you able to commit a minimum of 2 nights per month for board meetings and possibly extra days for special meetings? Are you comfortable with reading documents thoroughly for comprehension, sometimes in a short time frame, and arriving at meetings fully prepared to professionally engage and execute the business of the School District of Beloit? And how do you plan to manage your schedule to make this happen?
Yes, I am comfortable with committing 2 nights a month. I'd be surprised if it was that few. I am excuse me? I'm comfortable reading documents for comprehension and being prepared at every board meeting. And to manage my schedule to make this happen, perhaps to my husband's delight, buy fewer garden plants and fewer Lego sets. Once your children are grown and moved out of the house, as mine are, time management becomes much easier. I know parents who serve in elected positions, as I once did, have to sacrifice family time and sometimes miss a child's game or performance. I understand that not every board member will be able to attend every board meeting, but once the commitment is made and the oath is taken, the responsibilities and duties should be a personal priority.
Thank you, Tia. We are going to continue to move forward with our interviews. We have one more tonight, and then we'll be voting, and we'll be informing all candidates in terms of the results.
Okay, no further questions?
We don't have any other
Okay.
questions.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are y'all dictating or am I just going? All right, I'm just checking.
Make sure everybody's here. Okay. All right, Simran, thank you for coming in. So we'll ask the questions and we'll start.
I'll answer them.
All right. Start with number one. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your education, work experience, hobbies, and any other information you'd like to share, and tell us why you should be appointed to the Board of Education.
Okay, I'm Allison Semro. I attended the school district of Beloit. I then went on to UROC and got my Associates of Science and Arts. Got my BSN, Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Worked in progressive care, cardiac care, step-down units. I am currently staying at home with my kids, who both attend the district, by the way, and have since 4K. I previously filled the board vacancy. I coach softball and baseball. Just came from that, by the way. A little sweaty. I volunteer in the district, anything from reading to field trips to helping out on picture day, you name it, I'm here for it. So I've lived on the west side for the majority of my life. I really firmly believe our district needs some kind of representation from the west side. I feel like if it's not me, I'm really hopeful that tonight you guys pick somebody from the west side. Because there's nobody from the west side up there, and the west side feels like they're not heard, and I feel like they need more representation. I feel like my nursing education and work experience, they offer an analytical set of problem-solving skills. So I am educated to look at a whole system. I identify the issues, I implement interventions in that system to remedy the situations. Then I evaluate those outcomes. That's my job. And then I find out if those outcomes are improving the system, and if they're not, then I go back and I work on those interventions and until we find an outcome that works. I think those skills are perfectly suited for the board because that's what you do. You look at the system and you look how to fix it, and then you evaluate it. That's the basics of me. Any questions? No.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here and being willing to do the work. So question number two, recognizing that last year on the state report card, the district increased from a 1-star, fails to meet expectations, to 2 stars, meets few expectations. How do you define growth? Part 2 of that is, what do you believe are the strengths of the school district of Beloit?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Okay, so first of all, always happy to see growth, okay? Yeah, we're going from 1 star to 2. It looks bleak to a lot of people. They're like, oh no, we're not, okay. I get it. And yeah, I'd love to see us at, 3, which meets expectations, or 4, which, let's get there. Let's exceed those expectations. However, growth isn't linear. Sometimes growth is 2 steps back and 3 steps forward. Sometimes you got to do the work, and there's going to be failures. That's just a fact of success. You're not always going to get there. You're not going to get to the finish line without some failure. I feel like there's ups and downs, but growth is multidimensional. If you're seeing progress, that's a plus. And even if you're seeing setbacks, if you're still driving for those goals, that's what I'm talking about when I'm thinking growth. Okay, second part, strengths. Okay, I could sit here, I could name all the programs and all that jazz band, all the things that are great about the school district of Beloit. And we have some seriously great programs. We could use some more, obviously. But if I want to get down to brass tacks, I feel like the strength for our district is the people. There's some amazing admins. Our teachers, oh my God, they bleed for our students. They're phenomenal. Our paras, underappreciated paras who do so much for our students. The students themselves, the secretaries, the janitors, the people are our strength. The bonds and commitments we have to our community, that is the strength of School District of Beloit.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
How are you engaged in our community, and is any of your experience relevant to serving on the Board of Education? How do you feel the Board of Education can better engage our stakeholders?
Okay, all right. Well, like I said, I previously filled a vacant board position. So I have experience in that. Like I said, I volunteer in our district, doing a variety of things. I'm a member of Good Trouble Beloit, if y'all heard about it, trying to give a voice to the ones in need and to change policy in all governmental levels. I serve on the ABLCC, Greg's there. I've been there since 2020. That's the Alcohol Beveraging Licensing Control Committee. So I also coach softball and baseball. I'm immersed in the district and community. I think those are positives to help me serve. So engaging our stakeholders. All right, well, this probably has never changed with me. I think we need to engage our stakeholders more. I think we need to get our stakeholders in our buildings volunteering more. I think we are not using that asset. I think that, like I said when I was on the board before, and I said it again and again, and I'm going to keep saying it again and again, we have amazing people in our community who we should be tapping to help in our schools. They could be filling many niches, and we need to try and reach out to those in a better way, you know, like just putting it on the, you know, website, that's not enough, you know. We need to say, hey, we're looking for people to do this. Are you interested to come and help us better our community? Man, I want to do that. We got to get that community trust, and I think that's a huge way we can do it by inviting them in. Hey, do you guys want to come help us fix things? Are you interested in that? You hear a lot of people say a lot of things about the district, but how many of them are willing to step into the buildings and do the work? And until they're willing to do that, I think they should just sit down. But, you know, I think that that would be a great way to engage our stakeholders.
Thank you. In some situations, you may be asked to accept the reality that is contrary to your own belief. As a Board of Education member, you may cast a minority vote on an issue passed by the majority of the Board of Education. What would your reaction be in this situation?
Well, my reaction would be, okay, I'm in the minority. That's what a board is. It's not an individual. The board's a unit, and yeah, you're not always going to agree, but you need to be able to work together. And you need to be able to be okay with disagreeing, because it's going to happen no matter what. There has to be relationships where you can discuss, and my beliefs might not fit to somebody's, but I'm still going to try and get us to a shared vision that's going to improve things. So I guess that's where I'd be.
Okay, thanks for being here this evening. As a Board of Education member, you will receive input from people representing special groups of interest. How do you plan to use this information in decision-making and encourage them to direct the issue to the proper staff member?
Okay. So I think a huge problem people have is listening to respond, not to understand. I think when you're engaging with people, a special group or interest, definitely need to listen to understand, not just to respond and say, oh yeah, you got to go to this person, whatever, you know. I think it's important to figure out, you know, maybe it's not just this one person. Maybe there's a variety of people who could help in this situation. Definitely helping them get in touch with them, not just giving them an email saying, here's their name, you know, this is when they're best available, you know. And then, this is something I think needs to be done more, follow-up. I think we need to follow up with people and say, hey, I related your information to so-and-so, and did they get back to you? Have you guys come to common ground? Is there anything else I can help you with? I think that's something might be lacking a little bit, because a lot of people I speak to say, you know, I message, I call, I do these things, and I get nothing, and they're mad, understandably so. I think getting back to people and just saying, hey, I'm here just checking up. Did you get somewhere with this? Is there some more I can do? I mean, it's something small, but it's huge for people. You know, it builds trust. They need to see we're making sure we're meeting those needs. So not just directing it to them, but also following up and figuring out if I can help them more.
All right, thank you for that. In your opinion, what should be the relationship between the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools?
Okay. So the board is here to create policy, improve achievement, you know, improve performance in the schools. So, you know, our job is to give strategic guidance, set those policies, and then we need to come back and we need to evaluate whether those policies are working, whether the superintendent is meeting those goals by evaluating him and figuring out where he needs to improve and where we need to maybe change policy. Like, you know, maybe we're working and he's doing the things, but maybe education isn't hitting it where we need it, you know what I'm saying? So we need to be able to pull that back and say, okay, we're trying here, but we need to evaluate how we can change these educational policies to fit the needs of our district. So basically, we're there, we're giving him these things, and we're supporting him. He's out there implementing them, and then we're evaluating how well he does.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What do you think are the most pressing challenges facing the school district of Beloit? And what do you think the Board of Education should do to address these challenges?
Whew. Okay. So let's just throw it out there from the beginning. Funding is a huge issue for every public school in the nation right now. We're struggling. We're not getting the funding we deserve and need. So right now, I know with the district and the charter school and losing the referendum, we definitely have some financial issues, and I know that's a question later, but I think that at some point, we're gonna need a referendum. Excuse me. And so that funding, you know, is there. We're gonna need that so we can avoid the school closures. We can avoid losing these amazing teachers we have. We can maintain our buildings. That's always important. I think that we have kind of lost the trust of part of the community. That's tough, and I think that that's evidenced by our students leaving in droves. Our students, I mean, it's just the facts. They're leaving. They're running from our district, and part of that is because we don't have that trust anymore. And they don't believe we're going to do a good job. They may love this teacher, but you know, a lot of these parents that I personally speak to and students are scared out of their minds about sending their kids across town to go to school from the west side. That's a huge loss of trust. And I get it. Okay, I get it. Hard decisions, right? We got to make them, obviously. There's no way of getting around hard decisions. However, I think sometimes plans and ideas can sound amazing in a presentation. They can look perfect on a PowerPoint. You pull up the financial plan and it's like, boom, that's on point, all right? But then when you implement that plan and it's detrimental to the people you're trying to protect, the students, the staff, the parents, I think you have to look at things bigger than just it looks good on paper. You got to look at, yeah, this meets our financial goals. We're just going to go with it. You got to look at the bigger picture. And I think that gaining the community's trust back and looking at things as a whole, and seeing who's gonna suffer, and if it's important to us that they are suffering. So I think that's a huge way our challenges could be met by facing those things.
Thank you so much. What responsibility do Board of Education members have for learning environments in our schools?
Okay. Learning environments. So, again, we're going to look and we're going to see, what outcomes we have coming. And we're going to see our learning environments effective. Are our students meeting any requirements? And again, let's be honest, testing doesn't always tell us that. I think listening to the teachers will tell us that in a big way where tests won't. If our teachers come and they say, listen, we've got this plan and we're doing this for math or we're doing this for reading and this is what we have going on, and it's not working. So we need to listen to parents when they come to us and they say, look, my student's struggling because of A, B, and C. We need to hear people again. That way we can look at the policies and the programs and we can say, okay, this is working, this is not. This might need some tweaking. I really want to direct those things and then keep the public informed. Like, I want to say, hey, this is what we've decided to do. Again, get back to people, communicate, open channels. I think that when we see what we've chosen, I think that we do need to look a little bit more at, proven methods and where the science is. For instance, a big thing that I see in our district is our kids need more playtime. Play is life, and that is how kids learn. I don't see a 9-year-old getting 20 to 30 minutes a day in the playground. That's not enough play. Play is essential. That's just one example. With scientifically proven, with more play, kids do better in all facets of education. So these are the things I'm talking about. Let's hear our learning environments from everybody. Let's look at the science and let's change it to make it better for the kids.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
What is your understanding of the School District of Beloit's current financial situation? What are your thoughts on how to address the situation?
Okay, as I had said before, I know, funding is, all these public schools, we're just struggling, just struggling. It's bad. And I know the fiscal year just started July 1st, so I don't have a lot of information from y'all. I know about the deficit. I know about the changes of where we are now. Again, as I said before, I think we need that referendum. It's going to happen. We're going to need it if we don't want to. We don't want to lose more schools and more staff. I know we're struggling financially. I'm going to go back to my other point briefly. I do think that bleeding open enrollment and losing all those students, we need to remedy that. Why are they leaving? A lot of them are leaving for certain very obvious reasons. And I think that we could be fixing those reasons. We could be gaining trust back with the community and saying, hey, we hear you. We hear you, okay? Our community needs to hear that from y'all. And then I think at the referendum time, I think it's imperative that on that referendum, instead of we're just like, we need to fix this building, we're gonna do stuff for education. I want a plan. I want them to see these are the things we're gonna do to increase academic achievement. These are the things we're gonna give our teachers. This is the support we're gonna give. This is how we're gonna do it, and this is our plan. And I think if we can give them that instead of, yes, we may need, obviously, building, and I know everybody's talking about a football field, but again, when you get down to the importance of it and what people really want to have their kids have when they come back to school, if they're gonna bring them back here, they want them learning, and they want them doing it in a great, fun, effective way. So I think that, again, we got to build that trust back with the community. We gotta convince them that, yes, we do need this money for these reasons, and we're going to be responsible with it. So that's what I got.
Okay. Are you able to commit to a minimum of 2 nights per month for board meetings and possibly extra days for special meetings? Are you comfortable with reading documents thoroughly for comprehension, sometimes in a short time frame, and arriving at meetings fully prepared to professionally engage and execute the business of the school district of Beloit? And how do you plan to manage your schedule to make this happen?
Okay, yes, I'm absolutely able to commit. No problems there. I have a pretty awesome support system. I'm definitely comfortable reading documents. Some of you know I can do that. Short time frames, I can make it work. I expect everybody to be prepared, so I will also be prepared if, in fact, you choose me. And managing my schedule will just be one more thing, because, I mean, that's life, right? You know, we all have the things. We just got to make it happen, so we do.
Thank you, Allison. We'll be
You're welcome.
following up with everyone who was a candidate, and we'll be voting, and, you know, that's our next steps, and we'll contact you.
I feel you.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions here, or?
No, I mean, are we just going to go through the voting process then, or?
That's my plan.
It sounds good to me.
All right. Ms. Shope, you have the ballots.
Okay, I have the tally. I have 2 votes for Andrea Cleland, 3 votes for Teresa Johnson, and 1 vote for Allison Semrau.
Oh, read it one more time.
Yes, 2 votes for Andrea Cleland, 3 votes for Tia or Teresa Johnson, and 1 vote for Allison Semrau.
All right, give us, so nobody has 4, so give
Correct.
us round 2.
Okay? Okay, I have 2 votes for Andrea Cleland and 4 votes for Tia Johnson.
So then we have selected Tia Johnson. All right. So we will get things set up, and Tia will be sworn in. Should we, well, we voted. Do we need to, any motions, or our vote is our vote, and that's it?
I think once we voted, and I think we just need to adjourn.
All right. Let me get back into our agenda. All right. So our next meeting date is Tuesday, July 18th, 2023. Michelle will take care of the, we'll work with her and Dr. Garrison to contact Tia Johnson and to communicate to the other candidates. And Tia will be sworn in on the 18th of July. All right. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Brian Anderson and seconded by Board Member Brian Nichols. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned.